Okay, so I got angry today about some client work I was doing, and I want to tell the story. Hopefully, I'm not trying to get people in trouble by telling the story, but tell the story and share why I got angry and why I felt that it was so important. So I think of myself as a very peaceful person. I don't let myself get caught up in anger very much. But there was a moment as I was looking through, as I was reviewing some stuff that's about ready to launch for a client, that I actually slammed my hand on our dining room table. I was sitting at the dining room table with the kids wandering around. As it happened, and my son looked at me like, should I be worried right now? Of course, I took a deep breath. I brought myself kind of back to center, and I went about addressing it in the most productive way possible. But what happened is I was looking through this copy that I had submitted, we'd gone through rounds of revisions, all of that, and it went to the client, and at some point it went to a copy editor. And that person made a bunch of edits, and then it went into production without those edits being reviewed by anybody else. And not only did the HTML version of the page get edited, but also a video version got recorded and produced. And I didn't see it until after both of those things had happened. So I'm sitting there and I'm going through all of the little changes that were made to the copy and just growing more and more and more frustrated, because if the person had been reading the copy out loud, most of the changes wouldn't have been made. I think that this person in particular, I don't know who they are. I don't. But I'm pretty sure this person doesn't even understand how to use punctuation. And I say that and it sounds really mean and rude, but there were places where commas were added where they didn't belong. There were places where a word was made hyphenated or with a dash in between where it actually wasn't appropriate in that usage of the language, and all sorts of things. All of my subheads, which for this particular letter, for this particular promotion, I made the conscious decision to put them in sentence capitalization. They got upgraded to title caps. And there were line breaks changed in my subheads, which all of these things individually may seem like I'm just being nitpicky, but part of the reason that I am considered a top copywriter is because I know what to be nitpicky about. So for example, if you're going to have line breaks in a subhead, one of the absolute critical things that you want to think about is if someone is scrolling down the page, and this is a long form marketing promotion, how when they see the subhead scrolling the page, as they're scrolling past the subhead, how quickly can their brain, even before they're consciously thinking about it, process the ideas that are contained in that subhead, the chunks of ideas, and then give them that flag, have their reticular activating system go off and say, you know what, pay attention to that. And when you chunk ideas correctly, it makes it faster, easier, quicker for the brain to say, oh, that's what that's about. And if you assume that the job of the subheads is to pull people who are scanning the copy into the copy itself, then you want those to be chunked in as low effort of a way as possible for the reader. Let me say that again because it came out kind of weird. You want them to be chunked in a way where it takes as little effort as possible for the reader to understand exactly what you're saying. And so if a headline is a collection of 3 ideas, a subhead, or 3 parts of the idea, then you want those 3 parts of the idea to be somehow chunked out. So how this stock made 583% gains in 10 months. So how this stock should be one chunk, made 583% gains should be another chunk, in 10 months should be another chunk. And you want to make sure that any breaks between those is dictated by chunking of ideas, not by whatever weird reason, somebody who might not be thinking through all these little details would be deciding to chunk their subhead. And then there's the whole thing of like reading through, and does it make sense to add a comma? No, it interrupts the flow of reading. So even if it might be grammatically correct to add the comma, you want people to be able to read your copy as fast as possible. And so adding a comma, which essentially tells the brain to pause, does not make sense. And so like thinking about all these little elements, or for example, like why for one promotion might I choose that the headlines are in title caps versus in sentence capitalization? Well, if it feels like more informal and conversational, I'm probably going to do sentence capitalization, versus if it feels like it's designed to look and read more like an article or like a put together report, then it is going to most likely have the title caps on the subheads. So little decisions like that, but they all add up through time, or through they have a cumulative effect. Other things, like as I'm reviewing this, like the visual appearance, they made decisions on the visual appearance to make it look good, to like a modern audience, right? But it's not just about making it look good. In fact, a lot of times with marketing, ugly wins. Like if you run a split test, the same ad designed in a really like nice looking way versus an ugly looking way, oftentimes the ugly wins. And it's not just about looking good. It's about consistency with the message. So again, if it feels more informal, it should probably look more ugly, right? It should look more like what one person would put out versus what like a whole team would invest in production of, even if it takes a whole team investing in the production to achieve the end result. How well does it match the experience of your target market? This in particular, I'm thinking about some stock charts. Like they well-designed stock charts, like looked like a designer made them. But if the idea is like, I just want to look at some stock charts, I want them to look as consistent with what a stock chart looks like for me versus something that looks really fancy. And then like, how does the design serve the main message? Like readability is paramount in direct response advertising, because while design can certainly hinder response and design can help response, like ultimately people are responding to the sales message. And so the goal of design first and foremost, and hey, like I'm friends with Lori Haller, who is an incredible direct response graphic designer whose stuff is in the mail every day. And online all over the place every day. And she agrees. Absolutely. Like she'll read copy. She told me she reads copy 3 times. So like when I've worked with her on projects, she reads copy 3 times before she even starts to come up with design concepts, because she wants to make sure that she understands it that well. So how does the visual appearance serve the main message? And things like introducing typos through editing, like I've been guilty of that. Like I understand, but you have to go back and fix them. And like 1 or 2 typos making it through in a 10,000 word long form promotion, that's acceptable, right? Like it's kind of unavoidable that happens occasionally, right? But when there are a bunch of typos that make it through production, that's really like when there's a team involved, when it's a team effort to put something out, especially, there should not be members of the team who add to the typos. Like the copywriter should have the most typos because they're the person who's like too caught up in their head to like get it. Like they read it how they meant it to be, not how it actually is on the page. And everybody else should be catching those things where the copywriter made a mistake. They should not be introducing new things. And honestly, like I try to avoid them as much as possible for my own writing, even as I'm turning stuff into clients. And the way that I do that is by reading it out loud 3 times, at a minimum. Like, and then I often have my computer read to me, like, because I want to catch all these tiny details. I want to catch all of these little things where, oh, the wording was weird, whatever. And honestly, like even on this, I found one place where clearly I let something slip through because I was comparing the production copy versus the last draft that I sent through. And I found one place where I was like, oh, that sounds weird. That there's a word missing. And somehow I let that go through. And actually I admitted that in my notes, but you have to be careful. Because even like as I was reviewing the video version of this copy, what I noticed was the person who was doing the voiceover recognized, or like even maybe subconsciously recognized, oh, that's weird. And you could hear just the brief, subtle pause in the voice of that doesn't seem right, but I'm going to keep reading, right? And that interrupts the flow. It interrupts the focus. It draws focus away from the message. Just like all of this, like over-designed advertising draws focus away from the message. Copy where there are typos or weird punctuation or whatever, or where the visual appearance doesn't seem to fit with the message. Like all of those things draw focus away from the message. And what you want is you want your reader, your prospect to be in this like flow experience of consuming your marketing. And that's why I pay so much attention to the tiny details because they matter so much. Now, I want to give you one more thing to walk away with on this. I worked with a copywriter at one point who his copy was responsible for over $5 billion worth of sales, primarily involved with various types of financial offers and not just financial newsletters. And he talked to me about something called negative thought packets. And what this is like the language you choose, these mistakes that you make, anything that just feels off. What you're doing is you are dropping a negative thought packet in the prospect's mind. And one or two of these through a long form promo, again, like one or two typos through a long form promo, a negative thought packet, it may hit them weird kind of on a subconscious level, but they won't really necessarily change their response to that promotion based on that. But the more negative thought packets, the more strange feelings that they get as they're going through, the more resistance will increase to your message because they won't consciously be thinking, oh, that comma was in a weird place, so therefore I'm not going to buy. But if there's 10 of those, and then there's 8 other things that are weird punctuation that just, they're not sure why, but it didn't sit well. And the person doing the voiceover has to pause in a couple moments where it was clear that it almost points out. It's an analog marker in the NLP terms. It's saying this is something to pay attention to, but it's not saying this is something to pay attention to in a good way. It's actually it's giving them something to pay attention to that is a negative thought packet. It's creating that negative thought packet. And the more that these build up, the more resistance they're going to feel. And even if they're like naturally drawn in and compelled by your offer, something is going to tell them that they shouldn't respond. And it can reach a tipping point that has nothing to do with your offer or the value that you're able to provide or anything like that, where all of these tiny details that are a little bit off reach a tipping point and you don't make the sale because of that. And so you need to be able to pay attention to all these tiny details. And if you pay attention to all these tiny details and you make conscious decisions about how they need to be, for example, the line breaks and the subheads. And then like as a copywriter, if I get to this point in the production process and I recognize this, like I have to speak up, I have to say something. I have to say like, this isn't right and these things need to be changed. Not because I'm trying to be a jerk, not because I'm trying to call this person out for being in this bad place in terms of like the production process and how they impacted the copy. Even though ultimately I did that to the client, I said like, this can't happen. But paying attention to all these details is going to ultimately impact the the outcome of this marketing that we're putting out in the marketplace. And it's in everybody's best interest to get it right. It's, me directly, I get royalty. The client, of course, they get the revenue. But even the people who work for the client who may not have direct performance pay tied to this, the more successful we can make their marketing, the more they're able to afford payroll and everything else that goes along with running a business. And so everybody succeeds more by paying attention to these tiny details. And in general, in something creative like copywriting and design, like you want to defer to the person who has the original vision. So there could have been an opportunity there, like to send that copy back to me, and actually the process and that client is kind of changing to make sure that those elements go back to the copywriter for review after that kind of edit. And the same thing, like when you deal with legal edits and when you deal with all of that, if you're working through all of these points where things are potentially getting changed, you have to pay attention to what impact those changes have. And so for things like legal, of course, I have to change it to match, to make sure that it's compliant and that it meets legal guidelines. But also I need to go back and say, okay, how does that impact the tiny details? And do I maybe want to suggest an alternative way to change it that honors what legal was going for or compliance is going for, while also honoring the style and approach that needed to happen in terms of my copy to maximize response. I don't know. What do you think? I know that some marketers have put out copy full of typos, full of mistakes, and it works so well that they just don't want to touch it. And honestly, I'm of the mind that like, I don't necessarily disagree with that, because when it works, it works. But given the choice, I'm going to get these tiny details right too. And hopefully that will increase the response as well. So comment below, like, what do you think? What's your experience with this? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And make sure that you like this video so that you can get more content like it, also so the magical algorithms of the internet will share it with more people like you. If you'd like to share it yourself with people who might find it valuable, feel free to do that. And subscribe. If you're not yet subscribed here, you can follow me. You can follow me here. You can also go to breakthroughmarketingsecrets.com to get my daily emails about copywriting, marketing, business building, selling, and more. My name is Roy Furr. This has been a video issue of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. I hope you've gotten a lot of tiny detail value out of it. And I look forward to seeing you again in your next video. I will see you soon. Bye.